Hey guys, Joe here with Reasonable Media. Today we're talking Ben Shapiro's top 10 reasons Republicans should be motivated to get out and vote in the upcoming midterms. Earlier this week in a segment on Fox News, Ben Shapiro listed and discussed his top 10 reasons that he felt would be the biggest motivators for Republicans to get to the polls. Today we're going to take a look at those reasons and try and determine, are they in fact the top 10 reasons that Republicans should be motivated to get out and vote? So let's get started and see what Ben had to say.
Number one, the courts. President Trump and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell have successfully remade the federal judiciary by appointing and confirming judges dedicated to the proposition that the Constitution must be read as it was written. If Democrats somehow win back the Senate, they will hold open every single judicial seat, hoping a Democrat takes the White House in 2020.
Okay, so in this case, I kind of tend to agree with Ben Shapiro on this one. I think he's right. I think once, if Democrats do regain control of the House, they will in fact do everything they can to continue to obstruct appointing the federal judges that the Republicans have nominated. That said, I feel like that's kind of a given in today's political climate. I think they're playing politics. I think it was the same thing that Mitch McConnell did with Barack Obama's Supreme Court nomination. I think that's kind of the norm. I think the Brett Kavanaugh stuff is kind of the extreme that you see when it comes to these kinds of things, when politics really run wild. But as far as like the federal nominations go for judges, I think he's right. I think you're going to see that. What I don't think, though, is that I don't think that's going to be a very big motivator for Republicans. First off, Republican voters are coming off of a huge win with the Kavanaugh nomination. So now Trump has 2 Supreme Court justices that he's been able to get on the bench. And that's huge. That's huge for any administration and for either political party. Being able to appoint 2 new judges really, really is a big win. As a result, I think by the time we get to the midterms, Republican voters are still going to be basking in the afterglow of that. And I don't think they're going to feel the urgency that maybe they should when it comes to, the lower courts, the appellate courts and whatnot. So I think Ben Shapiro maybe missed an opportunity there in not highlighting the importance of those positions. I think a lot of people don't really understand. I think most people understand the importance of the Supreme Court. But once you start filtering down to the circuit courts and appellate courts, I think it kind of gets lost in the mix. And so I think his time in that particular segment might have been better used, kind of illustrating that fact and making the argument that, look, we just won and we won big, but man, this fight isn't over. I think if he'd have made that argument, it would carry a little more weight with the voters. So let's see what else he has to say.
Reason number 2, the investigations. Get ready, gang. Democrats have already pledged investigations into every aspect of President Trump's life. They will subpoena every member of government they can get their hands on. And we know they don't really care about guilt or innocence.
Okay, so on this point, I agree with Ben Shapiro 100%. I think he's absolutely right. I think if the Democrats take control of the House, they are 100% going to open any and every investigation that they can. I think for Democrats running for office, they think that makes perfect sense. It makes terrific sound bites. And, they could say they're fighting the fight. But as far as, Democratic voting interests, I don't care about investigating for the sake of investigating. If you're campaigning and you want my vote as a Democrat, for God's sakes, please, somebody start talking policy. Give me something I can sink my teeth into. If your whole campaign is based on we're going to investigate, I could care less. I mean, I don't care about the investigations. I recognize that, that's the new weaponized, political tool is, hey, let's investigate anyone for anything and everything. At the same time, now, as far as Ben Shapiro's argument goes, I think maybe we're overlooking Devin Nunes, for example, and the Republican Party having already done some of these investigation shenanigans. So if you want investigations, if we want to have the investigation talk, and should we be investigating everything, I think we should also have the talk, should we let somebody who is clearly as partisan as Devin Nunes make a mockery of the investigations? And to further illustrate that point, you even hear it in multiple news segments across the different platforms, not just MSNBC or CNN, but you see it across the board how nobody ever really takes the House investigation seriously because it is overwhelmingly partisan. And I'm not, I named Devin Nunes, but Adam Schiff has proven to be just as partisan as the rest. So if we want to have a talk about investigations, let's have that talk and let's be serious about it. And let's call a spade, and say, hey, if you're a political hack using an investigation as an agenda, we reject that across the board and across party lines. That's where I think country before party would be a good application. Let's call out everybody who needs to be called out for that. Let's see what else he has to say.
Number 3, impeachment. While Democratic leadership has been kind of lukewarm on the idea of impeaching President Trump, the base is not going to settle for anything less if the Democrats take the House of Representatives. They will demand that Trump be impeached for any reason whatsoever, and then they'll push the narrative that corrupt Republicans don't care about the rule of law.
Okay, so here's one where I get where he's coming from. I don't agree wholeheartedly, but I mean, obviously there's merit to saying that Democrats are going to do everything they can to impeach. He had made a comment, something to the effect of the base is going to accept nothing less. I think it's a misconception that every Democrat wants to see Donald Trump impeached. And we'll kind of go into that in a different video where we actually discuss, why as a Democrat you wouldn't want to impeach Donald Trump. But I, as a Democrat, if Mueller comes back and has something ironclad that shows he should be impeached, I'll support it. But barring that, I'm not beating the drum for that. And I think a lot of Democratic voters, maybe once you get a little further in from the coastlines, you'll find a lot more, a higher percentage of Democratic voters who kind of have the same view. If he should be impeached, let's impeach him. If not, let's get on with business. Now, I feel there's value in the House flipping to Democrat as it pertains to impeachment, because if things stay as they are, and at some point Robert Mueller comes back with his report and it demonstrates that President Trump should be impeached for whatever, nobody is going to do anything with it. Republicans aren't going to champion that cause, and you'll see kind of a replay of the Brett Kavanaugh hearings where Democrats are outraged. When I say Democrat, I mean Democratic senators and congressmen and women. And Republicans don't really care because they don't have to, because they have the majority. So if they maintain their majority and there's a reason that Trump should be impeached, I don't think it would go to impeachment. And I think that's an issue. I think that's a big issue as it pertains to our democracy. I think that's one of the biggest issues. Now, on the flip side of that, if Democrats take the House and impeach blindly, and which they may very well do. I agree with him in that they are very impeach hungry. I think that works to Republican interests because I think it would be easier to dismiss. I think people would say, you know what, this is Democrats blowing this out of proportion. They've been trying to impeach him. They've been crying wolf for 2 years now plus. We can turn our backs on this and not lose much political capital. We can save face and just paint them as being overly interested in impeaching someone regardless of whether or not they're guilty, which some Democrats in Congress have gone on record saying they would do. And I think that's kind of a reflection on the party leaders and their inability to really rein in some of the people in their party. So I think he's right. I think impeachment, if I were a Republican voter, I think impeachment would be an issue that would get me out to vote. But I think if it works against them, it still could very well be politically advantageous for Republicans, depending on how the Democrats treat it. So let's see what's next.
Number 4, the economy. President Trump's chief selling point in his re-election effort will be the economy, obviously, and Democrats are dedicated to stifling economic growth if it means stopping President Trump. They will hold up budgets, they will blow out spending, they will push for harsh anti-business regulation. They'll kill the predictable pro-business climate President Trump has carefully crafted.
Okay, so this point in particular I find really interesting because I think he's right. I think that is one of the things that Trump is going to campaign on really hard is the economy. You know, look how great the economy is doing. And I agree. I think I don't think there's an argument about it. I think the economy is doing really well. The flip side to that, though, is I haven't seen any of it. I'm not any richer. I'm not any wealthier. I'm not any better off today than I was, under Barack Obama. And I think a lot of people feel that way. If you make under $500,000 a year, you probably feel that way because we really haven't seen it. And I think this is a point that most Republicans in Congress haven't really dialed in on. I think they thought their tax cuts were the best thing since sliced bread. And it was for them. For them. They really made out like bandits on that. And that's terrific for getting the rich Republican vote. As far as the rest of us, we're all still, doing everything we can each week to not be poor. So, yes, you can tout a good and strong economy. It just doesn't carry a lot of weight with it. If I'm a Republican voter, that's not bringing me to the polls. As a Democratic voter, that is going to bring me to the polls because, God damn it, I don't think just the rich should benefit from such a great economy. If I were a Democrat in Congress, I would be hammering that point. I would be bludgeoning Republicans with them. Every time they open their mouths about how great the economy was, I would counter them with paychecks that haven't gone up at all. And the fact that most people still haven't seen any benefit from it. So I don't personally think the economy is a strong reason for Republicans to get out and vote. I know it's going to be a big talking point for Republicans. I just don't think it's going to really land and build much of a following. Let's see what's next.
Number 5, foreign policy. President Trump's administration has done a terrific job of drawing us closer to our allies and throwing a scare into our enemies. He's done so because Republicans in Congress are willing to bolster our defense spending as necessary. The same is not true of Democrats, who would immediately move to cut defense spending.
Okay, so this point in particular really kind of caught me off guard with how Ben Shapiro presented it. If you're talking foreign policy, in the Trump administration years, I'd be talking North Korea. I would have highlighted, look, Obama said we're just about at war with North Korea, and highlighted the fact how that seems less of an issue today. I would have talked about NAFTA. Defense spending, I know it's a popular thing with Republicans, but I feel like that's just, it's old hat. And I don't think it's going to motivate that many people to get there on the polls. I think there's more motivating issues as it pertains to foreign policy. He could have highlighted Trump forcing Mexico and Canada to renegotiate NAFTA. As far as foreign policy goes, that's a pretty important foreign policy issue. He could have, though I wouldn't necessarily expect Ben Shapiro to, he could have, said something along the lines of, hey, if you want that wall built, vote Republican in November. And I think for a Republican voter, that may be, at least for Trump's base, that might be, a much more motivating factor to get to the polls next month as opposed to defense spending. As far as defense spending is concerned, I think most people, when you strip away the party affiliation and just ask most people, I think they're going to tell you we're fine with defense spending as long as it's reasonable. If they want to, if Congress wants to look at our defense budget and assess should we be spending all of these tax dollars on this particular, package of spending, I have no problems with that. Because if it's needed, I think that's an easy argument to make. So not really sure where Ben Shapiro was going with this one or why he chose to go in this particular direction, but I feel like he could have really could have highlighted many, many different foreign policy issues that would more motivate the Republican base. So I'm surprised that he didn't. Let's see what else he has to say.
Sixth, get ready for polarizing culture wars. We've already seen the Democrats suggest that mob politics is the new normal. We've seen the Democrats capitalize on racial issues to polarize the country. We've seen them try to divide Americans by class and sex, too. With the platform of Congress, look for Democrats to attempt a series of divisive maneuvers intended to relaunch those culture wars in new and frightening ways.
Okay, so honestly, I feel like this is just, I don't know, scare fodder, right? It's terror porn. He didn't list any of the culture war tactics that he expected Democrats to enlist after this election. I think he's right. I think there is cultural wars going on through both parties. I think a lot of Republicans in office stoke those cultural wars just as much as Democrats. I feel like that's kind of the norm right now. So, as far as listing it as a reason, sure, I guess. But realistically, I mean, to me, that falls into the water is still wet category. Let's see what else he's got.
Seventh, attacks on religious liberty. President Trump has been stalwart in his defense of religious liberty. Democrats will be just as stalwart in their attacks on religious liberty. They're surely going to attempt to push so-called anti-discrimination laws directed at religious businesses, churches, and schools. And then they will dare President Trump to veto those laws so they can claim that he and all Republicans are bigots.
Okay, so religious liberty, I've watched this particular part of his segment over and over and over again. And really, my takeaway from this is that he was trying to fill his list of top 10. You know what I mean? I feel like he had 9 and needed something else. So, he pulled one out of the old playbook, the religious liberty. I feel like this hasn't been very much of an issue in the news lately. You have Mike Pence as the vice president. I'd say, Republicans are kind of shored up in their religious liberty arguments, right? You've got control of the Senate. You've got Mike Pence. I guess if the Senate also flipped, which is highly, highly unlikely, maybe if Democrats had any platform that they were campaigning on, they'd have been able to, have a chance to get both chambers. But Democrats, by and large, don't have a platform. So the odds of them getting the Senate back too slim to none. And so I think you're going to end up with what you have now, where you've got the Senate majority and you've got the tiebreaker just in case with Mike Pence. And when it comes to religious liberty, that depending on how you interpret that phrase, that's not necessarily Mike Pence's strong suit, or, that's his strongest suit, depending on how you look at it. So I don't think it's much of an issue. I know that's a tried and true, we want religious liberty thing with Republicans. I feel like if I were making a top 10 list, this would have been item 35, So let's see what else he's got.
8, the twisting of social media. Social media companies are deeply afraid of Democrats punishing them for failing to target conservatives. Don't be surprised if those social media companies escalate their efforts to do just that.
Okay, I take it back. Religious liberty would not have been 35 on my list. Social media would definitely have been 35 on my list. Religious liberty, at least, like I said, it's a tried and true kind of old hat Republican thing. Social media, man, I do not see it. I do not feel it. I don't think your average Republican voter, I don't think your average Democratic voter, independent voter, I don't think the average person is going to the polls in November because of social media. I don't think, honestly, I don't care really all that much about Facebook and Google and how they pertain to politics. As far as that being a motivator, though, for the election, I don't see it. I'm not going to vote on that issue. I'm not going to be motivated to vote on that issue. I don't think most people care. I guess we'll find out, right? So let's see what else he's got.
9. Radical growth of the Democrat media complex. With Democrats in power, pushing every line of attack simultaneously, the media's never-ending fire hose of anti-conservative propaganda will merely widen the nozzle.
Okay, I like Ben Shapiro. I mean, I really do. I like Ben Shapiro. I like listening to him debate. I think the Republicans have a weapon in him that Democrats have not yet been able to match. I think he's effective. I think he's reasonable. And when he speaks generally, I listen to what he has to say. That said, Ben Shapiro is sitting above a Fox News border, sitting above the Fox News logo on Fox News, the network of Sean Hannity and Tucker Carlson. And I know a lot of you guys probably love those guys, but they are as partisan as it gets. And before you freak out in the comments, look, I feel the same way about your Rachel Maddows and, MSNBC, CNN, Fox News. They are all the same, in my opinion. They're all extremely biased, and they're no longer shy about showing that bias. And the issue with bias is that even if you're wrong about something, you're not going to concede that. You're going to just keep, party over country, party over country, party over country. And I think that works against all of us. So, man, what a bummer to see Ben Shapiro. Man, I don't know. Maybe if he were debating, somewhere at a college or something, and he said that, I would look at it differently. But seeing him on Fox News, I feel like maybe he missed the irony of his statements, because really, we're already seeing these media complexes and their biases from both sides of the aisle. It's nothing new, but it has really ramped up between the networks since Donald Trump began campaigning and took office. So, yeah, he's right. That's a good reason to motivate Republicans to get out and vote. But, man, I feel this is pot calling the kettle black, and he's doing it on Fox News. I can't get behind that. I feel like it's just too ironic, to have someone like Ben Shapiro sitting above the Fox News logo making that argument without at least acknowledging, that it's not strictly Democrats, that it's both sides of the aisle. And so let's see what he has for number 10.
10th, mob rule. Did you like those mobs invading the Senate and the steps of the Supreme Court? Are you enjoying top Democratic officials nodding and smiling at crowds harassing Republicans in restaurants? Get ready for much, much more. The only way to shut down the Democrats' new mob rule strategy is to stop them cold at the ballot box.
Okay, so the mob rule argument, I feel like that's a kind of a stretch. He's right. There are protesters that protested the Senate. They protested when people are, Ted Cruz recently, he was at dinner with his wife and protesters showed up. I'm all for that. Listen, I don't like politicians. I think all of the politicians, the vast, vast majority of politicians, not just now, but for all of time, have been crooked, dirty people. And they use their crooked, dirty natures to get them in that position in the first place. So I'm no fan of politicians. I am a fan of people holding their feet to the flames. I'm a fan of people saying, hey, what you're doing, in my opinion, is wrong, and I'm going to goddamn tell you about it. So this mob rule argument, I guess it resonates, with voters for either party, because either party can make the same argument one way or another. So I get it. Yeah, that'll motivate people, but I feel like, two sides of the same coin. I don't feel like that is one of the most pressing issues of our day. And I guess that's what I would have liked to seen from this segment from Ben Shapiro, is the top 10 issues that are most pressing today that should motivate Republicans to get out and vote. And I feel like this is more, tail wagging the dog, where these are the things that people are currently amped up about, so let's cite these and kind of, build some urgency with it. They want people to get out and vote. Like, okay, yeah, some of these topics, that's how you do it. But I would have much rather seen, especially coming from someone like Ben Shapiro, I would have rather seen a segment, where these are the issues that should matter, and this is what we should be voting on. Okay, so all that said, there is one last thing Ben Shapiro discussed in that segment that I 100% agree with, and I think every one of us can get behind, and we're going to close with that. Before we do, if you liked this video, leave a like. I genuinely enjoy talking about this kind of stuff, so if you disagree with me on any of these points, feel free to leave a comment. If you agree, by all means, leave a comment. If you think there were other topics he could have covered in his top 10 list, I'd love to hear them. If you like this kind of video, subscribe. Don't forget to hit the notification button. And let's close with the one thing Ben Shapiro said that I think crosses party lines and every one of us should be able to agree on. Take care.
Your vote matters. Your vote counts. Get out there on Election Day.